everybody, and welcome back to the channel. I thought that since the last video that I put up on Monday was about the ongoing series that I have in the works right now, on my TBR right now, that a good follow-up video to that would be another one of those housekeeping type videos that are good for the end of the year or as we're approaching the end of the year. And that is the popular series that I have not read so far. So for this video, the criteria that I decided to stick with is just that this has to be a series that I have not started. So I haven't read the first book in the series. I haven't picked up anything to do with the series yet. And obviously there is a huge, there is an endless number of fantasy series that I have not yet picked up, but the 10 that I'm going to talk about today are very popular, well-known fantasy series that get a lot of love on BookTube that for one reason or another, I just haven't gotten around to reading. So I'm going to talk about those series, talk a little bit about what has been holding me back, if it's anything or if it's just been time and space on the TBR, and then obviously open up to you guys to recommend which ones you feel like I should bump up in terms of priority, which ones I should try to read as quickly as possible, and which ones maybe you think I could skip altogether. Hopefully there won't be too many of those. These are all pretty popular series, so I don't see any of them being ones that you feel like I need to nix from the TBR altogether. But I'm interested to do this. It's so hard, as I'm sure for everybody, whether you're creating on BookTube or watching BookTube, it's so hard to watch people talk about the series that they love and know that you haven't had time to pick them up. It hurts me that there are so many of these series that I would love to read, that I want to bump to the top of the TBR. I need endless vacation days with no interruptions where I can just sit down and read constantly, but I don't think that's going to happen. So I need help prioritizing, which means that I need everybody to tell me what they think I should read first and what should be kind of bumped to the top of the list. We will open up this video with the most shameful books that are on my TBR, because these are not only BookTube darlings, but just like the peak of modern fantasy as per everybody who seems to read them. And that is series by Brandon Sanderson. So I will open up the video with the Mistborn trilogy. So I have not read Mistborn. I have not read any of Era 1. I have not read any of Era 2. I have started Mistborn 2 times. So I tried to read the first chapter of Mistborn twice. Once whenever I bought them for my dad, because I bought them for him like X number of years ago. And then a second time before I was on BookTube, but when I started watching a lot of BookTube and I heard people talk about Mistborn and how it was their favorite series. And I don't necessarily think of this as a DNF because literally I read like the first couple of pages. I didn't get any further than the first chapter. But there was something about Brandon Sanderson's writing style that at the time that I picked up the books just did not click well for me. And then I was worried that I might not ever like a Brandon Sanderson book, which basically would mean I would be kicked off BookTube, I think. But I did read Warbreaker last year and I enjoyed it. I still have to say that Brandon Sanderson's writing style takes a little bit of time for me to acclimate to when I picked up that one book of his, I did find that I had to get used to the way that he wrote and I had to get used to the way that he was telling the story, but I did find it to be a very enjoyable experience overall. There's a couple of characters from Warbreaker that really stand out to me still, and I really did enjoy the magic system and the way that everything came together at the end. So I am hopeful that when I pick up Mistborn, which I am going to do soon, I hope when I pick it up, I enjoy it more. And I'm going to be buddy reading it with one of the viewers from the channel. So I'm excited to do that and hope that that will be able to keep me on task when I am reading it. I won't be able to just close it a couple of pages in and go from there. But so many people love this series. I know that Patrick says it's one of the series that got him into reading fantasy and gave him that love for fantasy that helped kind of propel him forward to a point where he has read more fantasy than anyone alive. But I it's really hard to hear everybody talk about how much they love the series and not want to jump on that bandwagon. So I read Warbreaker. I am hoping to read Mistborn soon. And then after that, that will bring me to the next series of books that I have not started, and that is the Stormlight Archive. So I would really love to read Mistborn and then transition into Stormlight, but this is another massive and massively popular series that I have just never gotten around to reading. After my dad read Mistborn, he really liked it, so he began to buy the Stormlight books, and he is up to date with all of them and really loves that series. And we do our tastes tend to align fairly well. I definitely sometimes like things that are on more of like a literary skew than he does. But usually if he enjoys a fantasy book, that means that I will like it too. So I would really like to read it, and then hopefully we would be able to read the 5th book together when it comes out. That is my hope. And I know Brandon Sanderson writes pretty quickly. I don't know if there is a defined date for Stormlight number 5. I know he has like this big writing TBR almost that he plans out. So I'm hoping that I will be able to read the Mistborn trilogy and the first 4 Stormlight Archive books before the 5th Stormlight Archive book is released, so that I can read it with my dad when it comes out. But I definitely plan to read Stormlight. I just haven't got around to doing it so far. The third book series on this list is one that has been both, I think, very popular and also critically acclaimed, and that is the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. Everybody has wonderful things to say about this trilogy. I feel like it's one of those books that won a lot of literary awards, but also people who read it seem to agree and say that it's amazing. Because I know that there can be some discrepancy between the books that sometimes win these awards and popular opinion about them. That's the way I often feel about movies, like movies that win Oscars or Academy Awards. Sometimes I feel like they're a little bit too highbrow for me. So what people seem to think critically about movies, I tend to be the opposite. Like the movies that most critics think are trash are usually the ones that I end up enjoying. But for the Broken Earth trilogy, it seems like the critics love it, the readers love it, everybody seems to love it. I have heard from people that I chat with on Discord whose opinions I really respect and whose taste I think is very, very good, that these are amazing books, that they are so rich and so worth it. And I honestly don't know why I haven't picked them up. I do have the first 2. I think maybe the second person perspective, which is off-putting for a lot of readers, I think that has made me a little bit nervous. I have been worried about just how much hype there is around them. I don't want to pick them up and then not enjoy them, but I do really want to get to them. I feel like this should be one of my higher priority series to get to, and it's only a trilogy. So if you have read it, I would love to know if it reads quickly. I know there's some different perspectives and different POVs, of the point of view is different from what we're used to. But does that make it a slower read, or did you still find that you were able to go through it fairly quickly? I've heard a lot of praise for it, but no specifics about the difficulty of reading it or how your reading experience was. So if anybody has any tips or advice about reading the Broken Earth trilogy, then I would really like to know. Series number 4 is probably the most intimidating fantasy series that I have left. Dune was one of my one of the books that I have always been really intimidated by. Wheel of Time is one of those massive series that I've always been really worried about getting into, but I am reading the first book this month, so it doesn't belong on this list. But the other fantasy series that has long been a source of anxiety for me is the Malazan Book of the Fallen. This has gotten a lot of love in the circles of booktube that I watch recently, because I know Joanna has been reading it, Mike's Book Reviews has been going through it in this kind of massive read-along, Philip Chase talks about it all the time, and now Jimmy from the Fantasy Network is reading it and really loving it, which I have to say, while I love all of those booktubers and love listening to them, really respect their opinions, the fact that Jimmy is liking it means a lot to me, because I know that he is a very character-driven reader, and he tends to like a lot of the same things in fantasy that I like. And some of the worries that I had about Malazan, about the scope and the world building and the writing and the way that the books were put together, I was worried that maybe they wouldn't click for me or that I would struggle with them. And there's nothing that I dislike more than not connecting with books that so many people love. I want to love them too. I want to love everything. I go into every book wanting to love it, and I really, really want to love this series. So the fact that it seems to be connecting well with Jimmy bodes well for me, I hope. And this is another series that I hope to start. I need to figure out what I'm going to be doing with my Wheel of Time read through, because reading Wheel of Time and Malazan at the same time, a lot of people have told me that that is a bad idea. I don't want to feel burnt out. I don't want to feel like I'm struggling to read. So I need to determine what I am going to do in terms of reading those massive series. But Malazan is definitely one that I want to get to, and I will read it. It's just a matter of when, a question of when to add it to the TBR. Series number 5 that I have been wanting to read and kind of go back and forth on, actually, is The Witcher. So The Witcher is, obviously a very popular fantasy series, especially, gained some more popularity, I'm sure, with the release of the television adaptation. And this is a series that I don't think I had heard of it actually until I started watching BookTube, and I heard a lot of BookTubers talk about it, and then obviously the adaptation was getting made, so there was some buzz about it in that way. And at first, when I started watching BookTube and I was putting together a list of modern fantasy series that I would like to read, The Witcher was right at the top of that, because I figured I would start it, then I could jump into the TV show and it would be great. But since then, I have heard a lot of mixed opinions about the later books in the series, about the ending of the series, and it has made me a little bit nervous. I don't want to go into something where I feel like maybe the quality is going to go down book by book. This could definitely just be a bias in terms of the channels that I am watching. So Witcher is one that I would really love to hear some feedback on. If you have read Witcher, if you've read the whole series or part of the series and you have enjoyed it, or you do feel like it gets worse over time, I would really like to know that, because it was one that I was really, really excited to read, and I have just found myself kind of pushing it and pushing it and pushing it away. So I would love any advice on whether or not I should read The Witcher, whether or not that's something that I should prioritize, or that you would recommend leaving a little bit lower on the list. But I do think that I want to read it. It's just my excitement for it is not quite at the same level. Pippin knocked over a book, I think. It's not quite at the same level as it used to be. Moving on from that, so number 6 on the series that I would like to read is the Gentleman Bastards series. So this is another BookTube darling. A lot of people talk about the friendship in this series between the main characters, Locke and Jean. I do hear some comparisons to The Name of the Wind in terms of just, I guess, where the main characters kind of start off in their initial arcs. I know they also came out around the same time, so probably that contributes to a bit of that comparison. And then I guess another one of the ways that it gets compared, and this is what has held me off from starting the series, is that they both seem to be in stasis at the present time. There's no known release date for the next book in the Gentleman Bastard sequence, which I'm not sure if it's, I think it's book 4. I think there's 3 books out, but you can let me know down below if you have read the series, which one we're waiting on. But this sounds like the kind of book that I would really like. I know that there's a lot of cool structural things in terms of flashbacks and the way that the narrative is put forward. I love a good fantasy friendship. I like kind of swashbuckling / heist type stories. So I think there would be a lot of things in this series that I like. I am a fan of low fantasy, so if there's not a lot of magic, that doesn't really bother me. So I think that the elements that are used to make this story, I would really enjoy. But I, like so many people, am now nervous about starting a series and falling in love with the series, and for that series to go on being unfinished. One thing that I have heard is that the first book, The Lies of Locke Lamora, does work well as a standalone. So I wonder if maybe I could read that first book just to get a taste for Scott Lynch's writing, just to see if I do feel attached to the characters, if I enjoy the series. So if you have read either the first book or if you have read the whole series, I would love to know if you think that The Lies of Locke Lamora works well as a standalone. I am pretty liberal with my interpretation of what can be a standalone. I really like open-ended books. I like Stephen King's endings to books, which are often very open-ended and unpopular. So if you feel like it has a contained arc, then I could see myself reading the first book in the series. So I would love to get some feedback on that and see what everybody thinks. But that is definitely a series that I would really like to put on the list. The next one is I think the Deva Bod, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, series. So this one is another that gets a lot of love on BookTube, and it seems like one, at least from the way that I've heard other people talk about it, it seems like one that is a pretty good transition series for people who are shifting from YA into adult fantasy. That is not the point where I am in my life, but I like YA fantasy and I like adult fantasy. So I do enjoy series that tend to toe that line or that have some of that really plot driven, high stakes romance type feel from YA, but also incorporate some of the deeper themes and characterizations from adult fantasy. So I could be completely off the mark here because I obviously have not read any of this series, but the way that I see people talk about it on BookTube, I do get the feeling that it is one of those series that would make a good transition from YA to adult. So feel free to tell me I'm wrong in the comments if that does not line up with your impressions of the series, but this is just one that a lot of booktubers that I enjoy watching really like. I know Abby Salter really likes it, and hearing her talk about it has also made me really excited to read it. I picked up the first book in a Kindle sale, so I do have the first book available and I would really like to read it. So I don't know when, again, like so many of these, I don't know when I'm going to get to it. I don't know when I'm going to have time to add it, but it is a series that has definitely been on my radar, and it's one that I feel like a lot of people have read, but I, alas, am on the outside looking in. The next one, number 8 on the list, is also very, very popular, but very divisive. I feel like this might be the most divisive series that I have on this list, and that is the Nevernight Trilogy by Jay Kristoff. So again, this is a series that I had back when I started watching BookTube. I had wanted to read because I heard a lot of people talk about it, and it seemed to hit that like angsty assassin vibe that I kind of like. Like, I will never argue that the assassin books by, oh God, what's his name? The Lightbringer guy. Oh gosh, I don't remember. His name is like escaping me right now. But I really liked those books. They're tropey. There are lots of issues with them, but I enjoy that kind of like angsty assassin setup sometimes. So I had really thought that I would like the Nevernight Trilogy originally, but then I heard a lot of people say that it was just not for them, that they did not enjoy it, that it was too over the top, that it was too edgy. And I was like, oh, there's a lot of really good things to read. Maybe I shouldn't read it. I don't know if I'm that interested in it. But then one of my friends, Colton, who I talk to in Discord a lot, read it and loved it. So I have decided that I am going to bump it back up to the top of my TBR, and if I do not enjoy it, then so be it, but he has sold me on it, and I want to read it now. Plus, I know that John Gwynne and Robin Hobb and a bunch of really awesome people have given Jay Kristoff's next novel, Empire of the Vampire, really good reviews, so I'm planning to read that in October, and I think that that will give me a taste for his writing style. And then either, make me want to pick up Nevernight right afterward, or make me want to throw that idea in the garbage altogether. So we will see how that goes. But I know that this one is a pretty divisive one. So if you have read Nevernight, if you've attempted Nevernight and then DNF'd it, please let me know, because I would love to get a variety of perspectives on that series. The next one, the penultimate on this list, I'm going to talk about 10 series, is another one that I thought was massively popular, but like in recent months, watching a lot of my friends' videos, it does seem to have become a bit more divisive, and that is the Murderbot Diaries. So this is obviously a very well-known series of novellas that center around an artificial intelligence called Murderbot. And I had heard a lot of really good things about this series. I think the first time I had seen anyone talk about it was Patrick Rothfuss. I remember reading a review on Goodreads that he had written about the series. And so I think I had just like filed it in my, mental TBR. And then I know a lot of people on BookTube were enjoying it, and they're novellas, so they're easy to kind of pop in on your TBR. So I thought, okay, well, I could put those in. I would probably enjoy that. But then a couple of booktubers that I follow really closely read at least the first one and really didn't enjoy it. And the types of things that they didn't enjoy about it seemed like things that I would also not enjoy. So that pushed Murderbot way down the list for me. And I still think I'm probably going to want to read it because I do find it really hard when there are these massively popular series and I haven't at least tried them. Like, I think I will at least read the first one, but I would love to get everyone's perspective, everyone's opinion on Murderbot, because it seems like I was hearing nothing but love for it, and then there started to come some criticism or some people who didn't enjoy the series as much as others. So please let me know your thoughts on Murderbot. And then the final series is the one kind of classic work of fantasy that I put on here. Although it probably it probably fits in that time period between like your really classic fantasy and your modern fantasy. And that is Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. So with the first book being The Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams. So this is a series, this has not, honestly, of all the classic fantasy that I have read or wanted to read throughout the years, this is not, my gosh. Pippin is snoring. So my dog, Pippin, is a corgi, and their body habitus does not lend well to like lying on their backs. They lie on their backs like cats. I'll see if I have a picture of him that I can like pop in here to show you how he lies down. But because their like necks are so big, they get like doggy sleep apnea, and then they get these like snores or grunts. He's been to the vet. It's all fine, but it sounds alarming. So I'm sorry if you could hear that and you wondered if my dog was dying in the background. Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn I was talking about. This is a series that I didn't really have on my radar. Like, with all the classic fantasy that I have read or wanted to read, it wasn't really one that I thought about a whole lot. But as I started planning out series that I wanted to cover on the channel, one of the things that I wanted to be able to talk about is kind of the series that inspired some of our favorite fantasy authors who are working today. And Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn kept coming up and coming up. And obviously it's been a huge inspiration for writers like George R.R. Martin, Joe Abercrombie, John Gwynne, like all of those authors. So I really would like to read it. It is one of the works of classic fantasy that I haven't gotten to that I would really like to be able to read. I know Andrew at Andrew's Wizardly Reads really liked it, and he has kind of talked it up a lot. So I would really like to read it. That is one that I would like to keep on the TBR that I can get to relatively soon. But that is it. That's a lot, I'm sure. Like, that's enough for right now. Any more than 10, and I'm sure this video would be like a quadrillion hours long. But those are 10 of the most popular fantasy series that I would really like to get to that I have not yet had the opportunity to read. I would love to know if there are any really big popular fantasy series that you have been wanting to read and that you haven't picked up for one reason or another. Are there any on this list? I know everybody loves Brandon Sanderson, so I'm sure people will say, his series for sure. But are there any books here that you feel like I need to read immediately that I'm missing out on? Or any that you think I could kind of slash from this list and not be the poorer for it? I would love to know. I always like hearing from you guys and chatting with you in the comments. And I will see you with another video soon. Bye!